Ahmed AlManhali, a United Arab Emirates citizen, traveled to Avon, Ohio in June 2016 for medical treatment at the Cleveland Clinic. Upon arrival at the Fairland Inn and Suites, he was informed that the hotel was fully booked due to the Republican National Convention. Ahmed politely requested alternative accommodation options. While waiting in the lobby, a SWAT-style response occurred, with Avon officers arriving and detaining Ahmed, who was simply walking out of the hotel while on his phone.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Down! On the ground! Do it now! Get on your turn.
Confused by the situation, Ahmed questioned the officers, but they handcuffed and searched him, damaging his phone in the process. They found a second phone, which Ahmed used for business purposes.
Take the phone away! Cover the entrance, LT. Get your back again.
What is this?
Go down there.
What happened?
Despite no evidence of wrongdoing, the officers treated Ahmed as a terrorist, disregarding any investigation or backstory. Simultaneously, an officer spoke to the hotel receptionist who had made a 911 call, falsely claiming Ahmed had pledged allegiance to ISIS. The officer soon realized it was a false alarm and called off the search. Meanwhile, Ahmed collapsed and passed out, prompting paramedics to administer aid and to take him to a nearby hospital. The incident gained international attention, leading to the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Foreign Affairs to demand an apology from Avon officials. The mayor and police chief apologized to Ahmed, emphasizing that the incident did not reflect their community's values. Marriott International, the hotel's owner, expressed regret and committed to training to prevent similar occurrences.
You should not have been put in that situation like you were.
There were some false accusations made against you, and those are regrettable.
Ahmed filed a
Jensen said
lawsuit
in a
against the
statement,
hotel and its
"This
front
was a
desk
very
employees, citing
unfortunate
racial
incident
profiling."
and does not
While the
reflect
police
our
department
community.
initially considered charges
Avon is
against the
proud to
man,
welcome
call it
visitors from the
a
United
grand
Arab
jury declined to
Emirates
indict
and
anyone
other
after reviewing
countries
the
who
evidence.
regularly
After
come
3
to
years of
Northern
litigation,
Ohio for
Ahmed settled
tourism,
the lawsuit
business,
for an
medical
undisclosed
care,
amount.
or education.
The settlement aimed to compensate Ahmed for physical, psychological, and financial damages. However, he still faced lasting emotional distress, was haunted by the officer's eyes, and experienced sleep disturbances. The incident highlighted the need for improved cultural understanding and sensitivity among law enforcement personnel. Here we have Brian Philippiak, a 47-year-old Washtenaw County Sheriff's Lieutenant, who was off duty when he got pulled over. Deputy Morrison, after stopping Lieutenant Philippiak, informed him about the reason for the traffic stop. Subsequently, Deputy Morrison inquired if Lieutenant Philippiak had consumed any alcoholic beverages that afternoon. In response, Lieutenant Philippiak acknowledged that he had indeed consumed a couple drinks. After Deputy Morrison confirmed Lieutenant Philippiak's identity, he returned to his vehicle and instructed the lieutenant to exit the truck for a field sobriety test. The purpose of the test was to assess whether Lieutenant Philippiak had consumed an excessive amount of alcohol, despite it being evident he was clearly unfit to drive. Exhibiting evident signs of severe intoxication, such as slurred speech and watery eyes, Lieutenant Philippiak left no room for doubt that he was heavily under the influence.
Okay, you got your ID?
However, despite this clear indication, Lieutenant Philippiak adamantly refused to comply with Deputy Morrison's request to step out of the vehicle. Instead, he insisted that Deputy Morrison should either allow him to return home or let him sleep it off on the side of the road. In response, Deputy Morrison firmly informed Lieutenant Philippiak that his options were limited and made it clear that he would not allow him to be released in his current condition.
Multiple reckless driving calls about you. Okay. And then when I'm following you, you're hitting the shoulder of the road. You been drinking? How many? Okay. Where are you reaching in the back for? I seen you reaching in the back. You have an open container back there? Okay, you been drinking on the way here? You got your registration, proof of insurance? Do you have a firearm on you? Okay. Do you got your pistol? Are you a corrections officer or just deputy? Lieutenant? Okay.
Despite Deputy Morrison's persistent attempts to persuade Lieutenant Philippiak to exit the vehicle, the latter remained adamant in his repeated request to be released. He proceeded to assert that Deputy Morrison's job would not be jeopardized if he let the situation slide, emphasizing the potential consequences for himself if the matter were pursued.
Brian, I'm going to have you step out of the car when I'll do field sobriety test for you. Okay?
However, Deputy Morrison understood that ignoring the incident would not only lead to his termination, but also result in misdemeanor charges carrying a penalty of up to 1 year of imprisonment or a fine of $1,000. Deputy Morrison was fully aware of the extent of Lieutenant Phillips' intoxication, as he had allegedly observed the lieutenant discarding open containers in the back seat during the traffic stop.
I'm going to ask you to step out of the vehicle. What would you like me to do?
Just let me go.
I can't. I had multiple phone calls. You'd be in the same situation if I was in the vehicle in your county, correct?
All right, just let me stay here.
You can't. I'm going to ask you nicely to step out of this vehicle. Brian, my hands are tied. If I let you go, I'm going to lose my career over you. You don't think I wouldn't? This is northern Michigan. We were a small department. Okay, I'm going to ask you nicely to step out of the vehicle. You know I have my job to do. You know that.
Yeah, I just want you.
And I understand your point, your position. Okay, I'm trying to be as cooperative and nice to you as I can.
Despite Deputy Morrison's continuous efforts in trying to have Lieutenant Phillips step out of the vehicle,
After nearly 5 minutes of persistent requests for Lieutenant Phillips to exit the vehicle,
Just let me go.
I can't let you go. We're way past that point. You know this. You're a lieutenant. You know how this works.
Yeah, I do.
You would tell one of your deputies if they called you right on the side of the road and they asked you what to do. So, if one of your deputies is in the position as I am right now, calling you as a lieutenant, Lieutenant, this is what I got. What should I do? You're just gonna say let him go? Why? Just because. You're intoxicated. I know it. You don't put alcohol in the vehicle, then you're stabbing your back. I know it. You know it. You're a good guy. Brian, out of this vehicle. I'm asking you nicely. I don't want to see anything worse happen. Okay?
Deputy Morrison, having reached the limits of his patience, opened the door and firmly instructed the lieutenant to step out, avoiding any need for further escalation. Deputy Morrison proceeded to inform Lieutenant Phillips that he would be arrested for refusal to comply if he persisted in refusing to exit the vehicle. RNO, an abbreviation for resisting and obstructing a police officer, is a felony offense that carries a penalty of up to 2 years of imprisonment, a fine of $2,000, or both. After an additional 5 minutes had passed, Deputy Morrison cautioned Lieutenant Phillips that he would be tased if he continued to resist compliance with his instructions. Consequently, Deputy Morrison retrieved his taser and aimed it at the lieutenant, while firmly warning him that failure to comply would result in being tased. Deputy Morrison even considered using the backup taser at that moment. In this situation, Deputy Morrison possessed the authority to employ his taser and would not have faced repercussions for doing so. Fortunately, the threat of being tased successfully persuaded Lieutenant Phillips to finally exit the vehicle. As anticipated, Deputy Morrison did not tolerate Lieutenant Phillips' resistance, instructed Lieutenant Phillips to occupy the back seat of his patrol car, intending to transport him to the police station. Despite Deputy Morrison's clear directive to sit in the car, Lieutenant Phillips persisted in his refusal, stating, "I am who you guys are. Do you guys realize that?" This remark strongly indicated that Lieutenant Phillips was attempting to exploit his position of authority, seeking a preferential treatment based on his status.
Brian, we're done with this.
Hold on.
Talk to me. Yes or no? Are you doing field sobriety tests?
All right, so if this was the other situation.
Lieutenant Phillips clearly held the belief that he was exempt from abiding by the law. However, the officers present at the scene were determined to make it evident that such was not the case. Following some further struggle, they managed to successfully place Lieutenant Phillips inside the patrol car.
I'm not resisting, but let's stop.
You're tensed up.
Let's talk about it. Okay.
We've talked. I don't want to put you on the ground.
No,
I don't want to make
you
this worse.
All right, I will just sleep it off.
Dude, stop it right now. You know, stop it.
Allowing for his transportation to the police station where he would face the consequences of his actions. Subsequent breath tests conducted at the police station revealed that Phillips' blood alcohol level registered at 0.28 and 0.27%. For context, the legal limit for operating a motor vehicle in the United States is a mere 0.08%.
What happens? We're going to take you to the jail and ask for a data master. If you refuse that, we're going to get a search warrant for your blood. Brian, have a seat.
Stop, guys. Hold on.
Therefore, Lieutenant Phillips' blood alcohol concentration was over 3 times the legal limit, subjecting him to Michigan State's super drunk law, which carries penalties of up to 180 days in jail, fines of up to $700, and up to 360 hours of community service. So it's time to watch our next case. On July 26, 2021, the Orangeburg Department of Public Safety received a distress call from a female resident of Colton Village Townhomes in Orangeburg, South Carolina. The caller reported that a man was vigorously banging on her door and window, attempting to gain entry. Furthermore, she alleged that the man possessed a firearm tucked into the waistband of his jean shorts. In response, dispatch promptly directed all officers in the vicinity to respond without delay. Officer David Lance Dukes arrived as the first responder at the scene. With his firearm drawn, Officer Dukes exited his patrol car and proceeded to instruct a 58-year-old disabled man, along with his cousin Demario Julian, to immediately lie on the ground. At this juncture, it was evident from the body camera footage that Mr. Gillard was complying with Officer Dukes' commands. The recording captured Mr. Gillard raising his hands in the air and proceeding to lower himself onto his hands and knees as directed by the officer. However, before Mr. Gillard could fully assume the prone position on the ground, Officer Dukes unexpectedly and forcefully stomped on Mr. Gillard's neck. The impact caused Mr. Gillard's head to forcefully strike the pavement, resulting in a bruised forehead. Subsequent investigations revealed that Mr. Gillard's delay in complying was due to the presence of metal rods and pins in his leg and hip as a result of a previous injury. Following the aggressive act, Officer Dukes promptly restrained Mr. Gillard by placing him in handcuffs. Immediately afterward, Officer Dukes informed a second officer at the scene that there should be a gun behind Mr. Gillard, suggesting that Mr. Gillard had allegedly left a firearm behind the white SUV where he had been positioned prior to the confrontation.
There's a gun behind me. There's a gun, I believe, behind me.
I ain't got no gun next.
Mr. Gillard assured Officer Dukes that there was no gun present, and upon a quick examination, the second officer confirmed the absence of any firearm. Officer Dukes proceeded to conduct a search of Mr. Gillard's person, accusing him of failing to comply with orders. However, as evident in the earlier body camera footage, Mr. Gillard had been complying with Officer Dukes' commands from the beginning. Not once did Mr. Gillard exhibit any behavior that could be perceived as a threat, thereby negating Officer Dukes' justification for using excessive force against him. Once Officer Dukes ensured that Mr. Gillard did not possess a firearm, he decided to search the vicinity of the SUV himself in hopes of locating the alleged weapon. It swiftly became apparent that there was no gun to be found. Instead, it was discovered that Mr. Gillard had been carrying a stick wrapped in shiny silver tape, which he typically used as protection against aggressive stray dogs. Officer Dukes and the second officer helped Mr. Gillard back up onto his feet, at which point he began expressing his dissatisfaction regarding the unnecessary impact of his head on the concrete. The visible injury to Mr. Gillard's forehead, marked by a bruise and swelling, further supported his claim. In response to Mr. Gillard's confrontation regarding the incident, Officer Dukes provided a reply. At this point, it became apparent that Mr. Gillard was in need of medical attention. However, neither of the officers present on the scene initially took this into consideration. Fortunately, Officer Queenie Polidor arrived and promptly recognized the necessity for emergency medical services, requesting EMS assistance. As Mr. Gillard continued to express his grievances regarding the incident, Officer Dukes approached Officer Polidor and another responding officer to inform them about the situation. However, Officer Dukes' account was far from truthful. He claimed that when Mr. Gillard walked in front of the SUV, he believed Mr. Gillard was carrying a gun and repeatedly instructed him to drop it. Officer Dukes made further allegations claiming Mr. Gillard had his hands in his pockets and repeatedly ignored requests to show his hands. However, the body camera footage once again contradicted Officer Dukes' statements.
He was in front of the car when I came up. He was walking like this. And I thought it was a gun at first. I said, drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun. I had him at gunpoint.
Clearly showing Mr. Gillard complying with the orders by keeping his hands raised above his head. Officer Dukes mentioned to a fellow officer that he wanted to take the stick as evidence, stating that it was the reason for his actions. In response, the fellow officer promptly questioned the necessity of using the stick as evidence, pointing out that the body camera footage would suffice. EMS arrived at the scene to attend to Mr. Gillard's condition. While Mr. Gillard was being examined, Mr. Julian approached Officer Dukes and requested a card with his details on it. In response, Officer Dukes promptly informed Mr. Julian that he did not possess a card and clarified that the department did not issue such cards in any case. Officer Polidor quickly recognized Officer Duke's misstatement and promptly corrected him. She asserted that they indeed possessed cards and proceeded to provide Mr. Julian with her own cards as requested. On July 31, 2022, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division announced that Officer Dukes was taken into custody and charged with first-degree assault and battery. Several months later, in November 2021, Mr. Gillard received a compensation settlement of $650,000 from Orangeburg, South Carolina. City officials additionally expressed their commitment to establishing a citizens task force to provide oversight and guidance regarding interactions between residents and the Orangeburg police.